Crying is the best part of expressing a human emotion. We cry when we are sad, we cry when we are happy, or we even cry while chopping onions, isn't it? And for some people, there won't be any particular reason to do so. Okay, so get your tissues ready as we explore the reasons behind the tearful question that affects all of us. That is, how do we cry? Well, the tears are produced by the lacrimal gland, which is a component in our lacrimal apparatus that is located within the orbit above the lateral end of the eye and are drained into the tiny openings in the inside corners of the upper and lower eyelids called the puncta. Okay, let's dig a little deeper. The lacrimal apparatus is made up of structures that are involved in the secretion and drainage of lacrimal or tear fluids. It consists of various components which include the lacrimal gland and its ducts, conjunctival sac, lacrimal puncta and lacrimal canaliculi, lacrimal sac and nasolacrimal duct. Well, you have to remember these components in the given order itself to understand the root. Let's start. The place where a river begins is called its source. Similarly, in the case of lacrimal fluid, it is secreted from our lacrimal gland and it is then poured into the conjunctival sac. This fluid travels downward and medially until it reaches the lacus lacrimalis, also known as the lacrimal lake. From here, it then passes through the lacrimal puncta into a narrow tube, also known as lacrimal canaliculi. Well, these canaliculi are in turn open to the lacrimal sac. From the lacrimal sac, it then drains into the inferior meatus of the nasal cavity through the nasolacrimal duct. In addition to the main lacrimal gland, there are crossus glands, also spelt as Krause. These are small mucous accessory lacrimal glands that are found underneath the eye where the upper and the lower conjunctivae meet. But here the path is pretty different. Their ducts unite into a rather long sinus which opens into a fornix conjunctiva. This fornix conjunctiva is loose, soft tissue that lies at the junction between the palpebral conjunctiva, that is, the portion covering the inner surface of the eyelid, and the bulbar conjunctiva, the portion that covers the globe. Don't worry, we will get in touch with this conjunctiva in the coming session. Coming back to the cross gland, the main function of these glands is to produce tears, which are secreted onto the surface of our conjunctiva. Now bringing your attention back to the main lacrimal gland. Where is it situated? The lacrimal gland lies in relation to the upper part of the lateral wall of the orbit. Well, it is a serous gland and secretes alkaline lacrimal fluid. About the shape of the gland, it is J-shaped and has two parts. One is the orbital part and the other one is the palpebral part. The orbital part, which is larger and deeper, lies above the levator palpebrae superioris, lateral to the rectus muscle, whereas the palpebral part, which is smaller and superficial, lies within the eyelid itself. When coming to the ductal part, the lacrimal gland in total contains about 12 main excretory ducts. The ducts from the orbital part of the gland accompany those of the palpebral part and pierce through the conjunctiva of the upper lid and open into the conjunctival sac near the superior fornix. Well, this superior fornix is related to the upper eye, lying at the junction between the bulbar and the palpebral conjunctivas of the upper eyelid. Up next is the nerve supply of the lacrimal gland. The lacrimal nerve supplies the lacrimal gland. Well, the nerve contains both sensory and secretomotor fibers. First, consider the secretomotor fibers in detail. Parasympathetic secretomotor neurons stimulate the secretion of the lacrimal fluid. Preganglionic parasympathetic fibers from the lacrimatory nucleus travel within the greater and deep petrosal nerve and the nerve of the pterygoid canal, and then reach the pterygopalatine ganglion. These fibers synapse on postganglionic parasympathetic fibers within the pterygopalatine ganglion, which then travel within the zygomatic and zygomaticotemporal branches of the maxillary nerve and ultimately reach the lacrimal nerve to supply the gland. On the other hand, sympathetic innervation is from the superior cervical ganglion. From this ganglion, the nerve fibers reach the pterygopalatine ganglion via the internal carotid plexus and the deep petrosal nerve. The sympathetic fibers subsequently, without synapsing in the ganglion, travel along the same path as the parasympathetic fibers supplying the lacrimal gland. Here, sympathetic innervation helps in regulating blood flow through the lacrimal gland and glandular secretions. Keep in mind, both the postganglionic parasympathetic secretomotor fibers and the postganglionic sympathetic fibers ultimately reach the lacrimal gland via the lacrimal nerve. Okay, now we are done with the nerve supply. So what about the blood supply? The main arterial blood supply of the lacrimal gland is by the lacrimal artery, which is a branch of our ophthalmic artery. Sometimes the gland is also supplied by infraorbital artery, which is also a branch of the maxillary artery. And about the venous drainage, this gland is drained by the superior ophthalmic vein into the cavernous sinus. Finally, the lymphatic drainage of the gland. It is by the superficial parotid lymph nodes, which in turn drain into the superior cervical nodes. As we all know, the lacrimal gland secretes lacrimal fluid, which flows into the conjunctival sac and lubricates the front of the eye as well as the deep surface of the lids. Now let me ask you something. What happens when we blink our eyes? Blinking frequently helps in the spread of this fluid over the eye. From this, the majority of the fluid evaporates and the remaining fluid is drained by the lacrimal canaliculi. These remaining fluid in the canaliculi overflows as tears when it is in excess. The important components that are related to our lacrimal gland. First is the structure which is located on the surface of the eye that we can't easily see. It is called the conjunctiva. The conjunctiva is a clear, thin membrane that covers part of the front surface of the eye and the inner surface of the eyelids. It has two segments, the bulbar conjunctiva and the palpebral conjunctiva. The bulbar conjunctiva is the portion of the conjunctiva that covers the anterior part of the sclera, that is, the white of the eye, and it extends till the junction between the sclera and the cornea. Keep in mind that it does not cover the cornea. Whereas palpebral conjunctiva is the portion that covers the inner surface of both the upper and the lower eyelids. The bulbar and palpebral conjunctiva is continuous, and it is due to this feature that it makes it impossible for a contact lens or anything else to get lost behind your eye. Okay, so what are the primary functions of the conjunctiva? It keeps the front surface of the eye moist and lubricated. Along with the surface of the eye, it also keeps the inner surface of the eyelids moist and lubricated so that they open and close easily without any friction or causing any eye irritation. It also protects the eye from dust, debris, and infection-causing microorganisms. The conjunctiva has many small blood vessels that provide nutrients to the eye and lids. It also contains special cells that secrete a component of the tear film to help prevent dry eye syndrome. Up next is the small channels in each eyelid that drain lacrimal fluid from the lacrimal puncta to the lacrimal sac, which is called the lacrimal canaliculi. Each eye has two lacrimal canaliculi, upper and lower. Each canaliculus is about 10 millimeters long and is a narrow tube that begins at the lacrimal punctum and ends by joining the lacrimal sac. The superior canaliculus begins at the lacrimal punctum, which is located at the medial end of the upper eye. These canaliculi are the tubes that carry lacrimal fluid from the lacus lacrimalis to the lacrimal sac. On the other hand, inferior canaliculi begin at the lacrimal punctum, which is located at the medial end of the lower eyelid. It descends first, then travels almost horizontally to open into the lateral wall of the lacrimal sac. The lacrimal sac, another component of the lacrimal apparatus, which is a membranous sac and is the upper dilated end of the nasolacrimal duct. The sac is located in the lacrimal groove and measures 12 millimeters in length and 5 millimeters in width. The lacrimal sac has an upper and lower end, with the upper end being blind and the lower end continuous with the nasolacrimal duct. The sac is anteriorly connected to the medial palpebral ligament and the orbicularis oculi. When coming medially, the lacrimal groove separates it from the nose, and it is related to the lacrimal fascia and the lacrimal part of the orbicularis oculi laterally. Finally, there is the nasolacrimal duct, which is a membranous canal that transports tears from the lacrimal sac to the inferior meatus of the nose. It is located in the osseous canal, which is formed by the maxilla, lacrimal bone and the inferior nasal concha, and measures 18 millimeters in length and 3 millimeters in breadth. It begins at the lower end of the lacrimal sac, runs downward, backward and laterally, and opens into the inferior meatus of the nose. And at the duct's lower end, a fold of mucous membrane known as the Hasner's valve forms an imperfect valve. Okay, that's it with the lacrimal apparatus. Now, concluding the session with the clinical significance of the lacrimal apparatus. Number 1 is dacryocystitis. It is an inflammation of the lacrimal sac. Epiphora is number 2. It is a condition that is characterized by excessive secretion of lacrimal fluid on the cheeks. Epiphora can occur as a result of blockage in the lacrimal fluid pathway, which can occur at the punctum, canaliculi, or nasolacrimal duct.